Hi, everybody, and good evening. Welcome to the podcast. I am Dr. Brad Reedy, and this is the Finding You podcast. And today is Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. So, tonight, I had originally planned on titling this podcast Things in Self Help That I Take Issue With. But I posted something this week and got some feedback, some questions on it. And so I wanted to go through that post. And really, what it was this description of big T and small t trauma. And an idea about those that I think is largely misunderstood, even within the field of therapists themselves. So I want to talk about that. And then at the end, I cheated and put in a few of those self-help ideas that I take issue with. So that's the sundry topics that I'm going to be talking about. Before I get into that tonight, let me talk about our upcoming events. The next Finding You Intensive, our flagship program, is June 10th through 14th. I will be running that one. I run one or two a year. So if you've been waiting, looking forward to working with me, if that's something that you're interested in, the next availability will be June 10th through 14th outside of Park City, Utah. If you are looking for a deep dive, a springboard, something to get your work started, if you don't know what your work is, if you've been in therapy for a while and you want something to accelerate your work, the Finding You Intensive is that offering. For me, it's the most profound intervention, therapeutic idea, process that I've ever been a part of. So June 10th through 14th is that. For all of their inquiries, for private intensives, for couples and for families, if you're looking for a coach or a therapist who works in the model that I teach, you can go to our website and reach out to us through the portal there, or you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. Once a month, we have a support group for the alumni of our program. So that next support group will be May 20th. That's tomorrow night. And that is always on the third Wednesday of each month. If you'd like to know about that or register your alumni, reach out to us via that email address, and we'll be happy to send you the link and get you set up for that. If you would like to attend a workshop with me, I'll be doing 2 workshops nationally this year. My daughter and I will be running our repeat of our class that we're calling The Audacity to Be You, Learning to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. Our first iteration of this will be at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. We did it last year. We absolutely fell in love with the setting and the program. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit less than an intensive and a little bit more than just listening to a podcast or a lecture, the workshop is that. It's a $500 offering for a 5-day workshop in the beautiful Hudson Valley in New York, in Rhinebeck, New York. If you're interested, go to the Omega website at eomega.org, click on the workshop tab and find the Audacity to Be You there and sign up there. Our second offering will be at the Art of Living Retreat Center in Boone, North Carolina. That is September 27th through October 2nd. Same format, same price, same amount of days, different location, different time of the year. So if that works better for you in terms of location or in terms of your timing, you can meet us there. Go to the it's artoflivingretreatcenter.org. And again, look at the workshops tab and then click on the Audacity to Be You. With that, let's get into tonight's topic. So I want to talk about this idea of presence and what it means to metabolize. There's an idea that I share often that in attachment thinking, and when we think about a healthy attachment, it's not a really good word, by the way. In fact, the funny thing about the word attachment and attachment theory is it actually has the opposite meaning of what Buddhists mean when they talk about non-attachment, because they're actually the same thing. Non-attachment in a Buddhist sense is attachment, a secure attachment in a psychological sense in this model. So when we talk about attachment, we talk about the ability of the other person. In the case of child development, human development, we think about the parent who takes in, who listens, who is present with the child and can listen to their distress, to their complaints, to their pain, to their sadness, to their rage, to their anger, to their confusion. And due to the resources, the greater resources that are available to the parent, because they're an adult, those resources include perspective, experience, right? You have time on this planet as a parent, and you've seen that a stumble doesn't necessarily mean a fall. And that a fall doesn't necessarily mean the definition of your life. You know what it's like to have an absolutely dark day and to come out of it on the other side. The child has less experience, fewer resources. In a way, it could be understood to say they live in a smaller world than you do. So due to the larger world, the larger resources that you have available to you, the skills, the tools, the experience, you take in the child and you metabolize it via those resources, right? You know that somebody's telling you that you hate you doesn't necessarily mean that they hate you. You know that somebody's saying to you in a fight or an argument, I never want to talk to you again, doesn't necessarily mean that. So you can take in the distress. You're not fixing it. You're not trying to get the individual to feel something that they're not feeling. You can be present with their feelings. Oftentimes, this present is silent. I talk about in psychotherapy that the master therapists prides themselves on what they don't say. As a parent, often my proudest moments as a parent of my work is the things that I don't say. But I stay present and I wait and I wait. So in this sense, presence, an attuned, regulated nervous system in an other, or in this case, in an adult, if I'm talking about child development, an attuned, regulated, calm nervous system is something that we can offer to the child or to the other person that helps them to co-regulate. We loan them our energy, our calmness, our lack of fear. And if that exposure to that kind of an experience for a child happens repeatedly over and over again with somebody who's stable, who can see them, understand them, be present with them. Repeated exposure to that kind of nervous system means that the child develops an adequate nervous system, a nervous system that can weather life's storms, that can go through life's trials and tribulations and difficulties, and have a sense that they are okay, that everything will be okay. So the presence of an attuned, regulated nervous system is something we can loan to other people. And in the case of child or human development, the child's nervous system becomes a kind of copy, a carbon copy of the parents, of some combination of the parents or of the primary caregiver. The good news about this nervous system regulation is you only need one nervous system that's available that can offer you this. It would be ideal if you had more, but you only need one, the research tells us. And if an individual can be seen and understood in their unsolvable problems, in their distress, without the anxiety of the parent or the other person trying to fix it or make it go away or get the child to feel something else. And that takes work, right? That urge that you feel to be helpful, to offer somebody a solution or advice or a perspective that you think will help the situation, does in fact just the opposite. It suggests to the other person that what they're feeling or what they're experiencing is somehow unacceptable, inadmissible, not allowed, not okay. So repeated exposure to a regulated nervous system offers the child a copy. So then the child can go through life with what we might call faith, I suppose, some connection to a larger idea or plan. I think it's best illustrated by the adage that I often share, that the bird that stands on a tall tree, in a tall tree on a thin branch, doesn't stand on the branch confidently because it trusts the tree branch. But the bird that sits there confidently because it trusts its wings. So then you don't develop codependency. You don't develop addictions. Both of which are an attempt to feel something that you're not feeling. In the case of codependency, it is to control people, places, and things. It is looking for outside solutions to an inside problem. In the case of addiction, addictive behaviors, substances or process addiction, it is an attempt to inject the system with some kind of dopamine hit to feel better. So if you develop an adequate nervous system, one that's up to the task of living, you're less prone or susceptible to these kind of addictive disorders. I like to say You're able to weather life's storms. But if your nervous system is inadequate, not up to the task, then you're prone or tempted to try to control the weather. So presence metabolizes trauma. Trauma is not defined by the things that happen to us. It is being left alone in our trauma. And I don't just mean purely abandonment, not being present. But if a parent or another person can't sit with you and listen and offer that presence, but instead they try to fix or solve or give advice or encourage you to look on the bright side or to change the subject or to distract, any other thing, that is a kind of absence. That's a kind of abandonment. So the thing that causes the trauma in our body, in a manner of speaking, is the absence of that other person, that other regulated nervous system. That's the headline. But let's get into the story. Big T trauma is the obvious stuff. It's the events or the circumstances that everybody understands to be traumatic, right? The death of a loved one, divorce, bullying, parental alcoholism, sexual or physical or any other kind of abuse. These are things that everybody would, for the most part, would agree are traumatic experiences. There's a story to tell. There's an event to point to. There's kind of a tangible evidence of the trauma. That's the big T trauma, the obvious stuff that happens to us. Small T trauma, on the other hand, is harder to recognize because there's no obvious story to tell. Small T trauma is the nuanced and subtle process, the way that people were with you in your distress. Did they tell you to look on the bright side? Or did they say things like, tell me more, I want to understand? Did they defend themselves, which is probably the most common cause of small T trauma, is the defensiveness, the need on the parents or the caregiver or the other person's part to be good, to resolve their own anxiety, their own distress. So if that lack of ability to sit with you comes from a position of defense or overwhelm, then the process is small T trauma. It's the air that you breathe. It's the way that they were. It's how people responded to feelings, how they responded to your setbacks, your failures, your difficulties, the experiences that you came home with and shared with your family, the breakup. Even, this is the part that becomes quite illuminating, even the big T trauma that you come home and tell, the bullying, you tell that story to somebody, and if they can't be present with you, on top of the big T trauma, or I might even say kind of activating the big T trauma, is this small T trauma, this inability to sit with you. For the client, it's hard to see the small T trauma because you don't know another way. This is why the context of a therapy session, of being with a therapist, is so important, because it provides a different but safe context, a non-judgmental, patient, attuned, regulated presence. Just as a fish is the last one to discover water, so the client is the last one to see what I like to say is the soup that they were cooked in. It just is what it is. That's the way that's the way the world is, they think. They think it to be normal. When we know in kind of analytical circles, there is no normal childhood. There's only your childhood. So, a child can survive and even thrive in the wake of these big T events that I've mentioned, if there's a healthy relational container. Small T trauma is the absence of that container. So the big T trauma intrinsically doesn't cause kind of a mental health crisis, a mental health diagnosis, the development of mental illness. It doesn't cause it. It's the absence of the relation. It's the small t trauma that causes the mental illness or the symptom, not the big T. Going on, in a manner of speaking, as a therapist, while we will visit and talk about big T events, the healing medicine, the healing balm is what was missing in a client's childhood or later. It is the attuned, regulated presence of an empathic other. Thus, safety in psychotherapy is not a precursor to treatment. It's not something we do so that we can get to the main point of therapy. Safety is the treatment. Therapy becomes the childhood that you did not have. And the therapist becomes the parent that you did not have. In the presence of an adequate therapist, and that's what we call good therapists in analytical circles, in the presence of an in the presence of an adequate therapist, you have an experience with what is not like your context, something different. What was bad at home, what was unacceptable at home, in therapy just becomes human, becomes nothing. What was terrifying or ugly or repulsive or disgusting or stupid, whatever the word is, at home, and therapy becomes human, something to be understood, something to be met with compassion and curiosity and understanding. Repeated exposure to that context makes so clear the context that you came from. I've said this before that my therapist said to me many years ago. I said to her, I complained, as many therapists, many clients have complained to me in therapy. I said, I feel great here. But by the time I'm 5 minutes from your office on the way home in my car, the old ideas, the ghosts, if you will, begin to haunt me again. I begin to be not so sure of myself, not so confident that my humanness is enough. And by the time I arrive at home 20 minutes from your office, it's practically gone by that point. And so I said to her, what's the purpose? What's the process? What's the purpose of this? And she said, eventually you will have a kind of copy of my nervous system, a copy of me, she said. And at the time, I pictured a little kind of Jiminy Cricket character inside of me, which didn't make a lot of sense. But now I know what she meant. She meant you'll have a nervous system that is built on my nervous system, that has borrowed from my nervous system. You'll have a kind of carbon copy of my nervous system. And so today, many years after that discussion, and it took some time even after that discussion to begin to feel it and to realize it in my body, she's with me. I now can offer people what she offered me. In fact, it's my greatest joy to offer people what she offered me. It's the thing I want to do more than anything. When I've thanked her for the gift of my life, really, she's always quick to point out that I did the heavy lifting, I did the hard work. And there's truth to that, for sure. The client has to do the really heavy lifting, the hard work. But she also says to me, I'm just doing something for you that somebody did for me. And so now, after experiencing repeated exposure to somebody who comes as close as I know to the embodiment of unconditional acceptance and love, and experiencing what that does to me inside, how that changes me, how that changes everything, I just want to spend my life doing that for other people, giving them that same grace, that same presence, that same love that has been offered to me. I think that what most people might not understand about big T and small t trauma is that we're really always in this method that I talk about, this work that I talk about at Finding You, we're always treating small t trauma. If the client had someone who, in critical times of their life, could listen, take in their distress, and co-regulate, offering their calm nervous system, if they had somebody at critical times who was there for them in that way, we wouldn't see the mental health issues, the symptoms, the confusion, the loss of self, the fear. We wouldn't see it because it would have been metabolized decades before. So here's the idea. We are always treating small t trauma. Even when we are talking about the big T story, we are always treating small t trauma. We are giving the client an experience that no matter where we look, no matter how deep and how far we go, everything we find inside of you is human. And everything inside of you, everything you do makes sense if understood in its original context. Even psychosis makes sense when we understand the original context. So as a therapist, I'm listening to find your context, to find your childhood, to know what it was like to be you. My therapist tells the story, and I repeat the story in The Journey of the Heroic Parent, but for those of you who have not read that yet, I'll repeat that here now. She describes a story told to her by her therapist many, many years ago. Her therapist shared that she was working with somebody who had grown up in rural Germany on a farm. If you've been to Germany, you know how beautiful it can be. And sometimes this client and their process would talk about stories from childhood. Sometimes they would be sharing, of course, about stories and things that were happening in the present day. And there was one time in particular, as this therapist tells the story, where the client was beginning to describe some story, some circumstances, to unfold the story. And at first, the therapist said, I didn't know whether my client was talking about their childhood or whether they were talking about something that was going on here today. But then I could smell the river near where they grew up on the farm in Germany. So I knew that we were talking about their childhood. I don't know if she could literally smell the river, but it's a beautiful way of saying that she could feel it. She could see it. She knew that she was talking about the past. I've had that experience with clients also. I've had parents and children tell me stories about themselves, and it's not entirely clear if they're talking about here and now or if they're talking about something that happened long ago, which I think in some ways tells you that it's still happening today, right? But if I listen long enough, if I just stay quiet and attentive and curious, eventually I'll find them. And when you are found, everything changes. Jessica Benjamin, who wrote on attachment theory, said, it is the root of the self that is found through other people. It's not until we are found by somebody else that we find ourselves. So that's the experience of being found. The experience is, there I am. Being seen and heard and understood is what makes the self a self. Winnicott even went so far as to say that to be seen is to exist. And to be seen is to be really to be loved and to be understood. I make this point when I talk about self-love, but I'm going to make it when I talk about loving other people. You cannot know yourself any more than you love yourself. Your self-awareness, and this is a principle that is nearly universal. Your self-awareness will only be as good as your self-compassion. Because where your self-compassion and your self-love is missing, you won't see it. You won't be able to see it. You'll convince yourself that it doesn't exist or that you've solved the problem. You've eradicated that issue from yourself. So to be loved is to be seen as okay. To be loved is to be understood. To love is to be found, that somebody finds your story. They don't judge it. They don't correct it. They contain it. They hold space for it. We are always treating small t trauma. Even when we are talking about the big T story, we are still treating the small t trauma. We are providing the client a reparative experience. That is what is meant by presence metabolizes trauma, and absence creates it. You see, we can talk about the causes and the roots of trauma. We can explain its effect on the body, on the brain, on the nervous system. We can see its impact on the mental health of any certain individual. But understanding it doesn't fix it. So what's the medicine? As Jung suggested, learn all the theories, master all the techniques. But in the end, just be one human soul touching another human soul. And that's why so little has to happen. I am learning in my family to be quiet and to wait. I am learning not to make a joke, not to change the subject, not even to circumvent the process by offering some platitude about how I realize that I'm a stupid father or husband. Just staying present, listening, and honoring what the other person has to say about their experience, about me, tolerating that, holding on to that, and giving them the experience of what it's like to be with a person, an adult, a human who sees you. I love this quote by Rumi: move, but don't move the way fear moves you. When we're acting from fear, which is simply put, dysregulation in the nervous system, right? Almost everything we do from that place will have the same effect. Because what's being exchanged between human beings is an energy. We know that. We know that with modern physics. It's energy. So we learn to move the way that love moves us. And that's why techniques fall short. That's why skills don't quite do it. Because skills or techniques in the hand of somebody who's scared, for example, serve the fear. But techniques or skills in the hands of somebody who moves through life the way that love moves, serve love. So the biggest difference is not the tool, not the hammer or the saw. It's the perspective, the intent of the person that is using it. Skills can help. Skills can give us direction. It can give us language. It's the kind of concrete manifestation. But they don't have an intrinsic value. This work that I teach and talk about is about transcendence. Transcending consciousness. It's what Henry Miller meant when he said, one's destination is never a place, it's a new way of seeing things. That's the transcendence. It's really all just fear and love. Now, fear might look like, in some people, anger, intimidation, control, hate, right? It can look like it can be masked in those ways, or it can look more classically like fear. But no matter what it looks like, no matter how it dresses itself up, it's fear. And until you come to terms with, until I come to terms with the fear that I feel, and don't get confused or tricked by how it presents itself, I have learned that I've been afraid my whole life, much more than I ever imagined. I masked it like many men and many people do, with anger, with intensity, with success, with perfectionism, with overworking, with career success, with money, with stuff. But it was fear. But we men and we people sometimes don't like to own up to our fear. It's unmanly. We have learned through our lives that to be afraid is to be less than, to be unacceptable, to be inadmissible. So we sit with somebody until we're able to see it. We sit with somebody until we feel safe enough to see ourselves for who we are, until we can look in the mirror and see ourselves accurately reflected back. Shams Tabrizi said, he was Rumi's teacher, all of the prophets, all of the advice of the prophets can be summed up in this one adage: go find yourself a mirror. I love this quote that I recently found by Robert Brault that says, basically, we're all looking for someone who knows who we are and will break it to us gently. See, therapy is a place that we go to ask, I wonder how I might be a part of the problem. I wonder how I might be in some way the cause of my own suffering. We don't want that to be in us. We want it to be out there. We want the cause of our suffering to be our children, our family, our spouse. We want it to be the state of the world. We like ourselves a safe distance from the problem. But here's the thing. If the problem is out there, you're doomed. The best news that I can offer you is that you're the reason for your suffering. Who you have become up to this point in your life is the cause of your suffering. And that's not a judgment. That's just a description of what is. That's just a fact. So we learn through a safe container with a safe person. We learn to come to therapy and to start to ask, I wonder if I'm a part of the problem. The very problem that I came to therapy seeking to change or to fix, I wonder if I have some part in that. That is the hero's journey. That is the heroic parent. The hero is not somebody who goes off and fights these wonderful adventures and does all this wonderful stuff. That's not what Campbell and the stories mean by heroic. The hero is the person who confronts and deals with themselves. Now, you and I are not responsible for what happened to us. We are not responsible for the context that we were born into. But by the time we are an adult, the dents and the scratches and the wounds, they're ours. The adaptations, the way of processing life and information, it's now ours. We've got to own it. I listen to clients constantly go through the process of grief, talking about what was done to them. And I'm in no hurry for them to get over that. I'm in no hurry for them to get through that story. I wait. I listen as many times as they want to tell it. In fact, in almost all cases, I'm willing to listen a lot longer than they're willing to tell it, because they get sick of themselves before I do. And they expect that I will too. But I listen. And I keep listening with no effort to get to any goal, but just to be present with it. And the implication of the listening is, you're right, it's yours. It did happen to you. And the wounds and the scratches that you sustained were not your fault. But now they're yours. And the implication that I never speak really is, what are you going to do about it? What do we do about this? And the answer is we share it with another person. We help. We get help carrying it. We look at it. And the beautiful thing that happens as we see our wounds is we see that our gifts, all of them, are right next to the wound. So when people are out in the world fighting injustice, when people are out in the world doing wonderful things, you can bet that their wounding is not far away from the gift that they're giving to the world. That's what the myths show us. That's what human stories show us. Batman is Batman because of what happened to him as a child. Take away the wound of his parents being murdered in front of him, no Batman. In that myth, he's one who fights for people, the underdog, people who can't fight for themselves. So we could go back and say, I wish that hadn't happened to Batman. And none of us would want any kind of trauma like that to happen to anybody. But it does happen. And what we also learn from the myths is that the heroes and the villains, they have the same backstory. The difference is what you do with it. And if you close your heart, you protect yourself with anger and rage and hatred and judgment and certainty and control in an effort to protect yourself from further pain, you end up causing more pain. But if you open up and you grieve and you lean on somebody who can grieve with you or support you in your grief, you heal, you move through it, and you integrate the wisdom that that wound has to offer you. So the self-help topics that I wanted to share, I don't tell people to be vulnerable. I try to provide them a safe context where they feel safe enough to share. It doesn't make sense to tell people to be vulnerable, to champion vulnerability. Rather, it's my job to swallow and take care of my own shadow, to own my own shadow, my own stuff. So I'm not putting it on everybody else around me, not making them responsible for my life. And when I'm safe, clients, family members start to share. If your child says they don't want to talk to you, instead of getting them to try to talk to you, maybe you can get curious in psychotherapy and ask the question, I wonder why. May I have some part in my child not wanting to talk to me? My child going no contact? And just asking the question is enough. It tells me that you position yourself in relationship to the issue in a way now that makes sense, that has traction. So I don't like when self-help teachers tell people to be vulnerable. It doesn't make sense to me. Or to forgive. You forgive when you can. You forgive when you grieve. You forgive when you heal, when you integrate. Like I mentioned, you can explain trauma, but treating trauma is something entirely different. Explaining somebody what an ACL injury is doesn't fix the ACL. They still have to go to therapy, and it's painful, and it takes time. And if you're somebody like an elite athlete, you can accelerate that time. But it's still going to take time, and there are going to be setbacks. This idea of graduating therapy, I've heard people say that they graduated therapy or that even the goal of therapy is to get out of therapy. And my answer is, okay, if you want. I still go to therapy, and it's not because I feel addicted to the process or I can't grow up. It's because it's the privilege. It's probably my most important privilege is that I have enough resources to pay for therapy. That 1 hour a week, I get to go to a place and can't screw it up. I just get to be me, get to be seen. And in so doing, I get to see myself. And as my therapist has warmly and humorously pointed out, that's the thing about psychotherapy is the news gets worse and worse. The longer I'm in it, the more I realize just what a nincompoop I am. So graduating therapy isn't something I do to my clients. It's not something that I'm necessarily aimed at doing. I'll stop going when I stop going if I want to. But there's no weakness in going to therapy. The growing, the learning doesn't end. I never arrive. In fact, the more work that I've done, I've been in therapy now for, oh gosh, if you count the time that I was kind of forced to go as a child and went to family therapy as a child, coming up on 40 years of my life. And I'm more aware today of my issues than I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. And that's not because I'm sicker. That's because I have a capacity to see myself, whereas I couldn't before. So I just want more of that. Confronting defenses is probably my biggest. Confronting defenses just means to point out the defense. To point out to somebody that they're justifying or rationalizing or defending themselves. I understand how that works in a fight. I understand that that's standard warfare between individuals. But as a therapist, as a father and a husband, when I'm doing okay, I don't point out somebody's defenses. I show up in a way, hopefully, that feels safe so they don't need the defense, because the defense is only there as a protection against threat. So I don't point out defenses or confront them. I simply help the person understand that what they're doing, how they've adapted, the way they've been sent out of the world, was what they needed to do to survive up to this point, and it makes sense. And while it might have lost its value, its utilitarian value, at one point it was life-saving. That's why I don't like when self-help authors say worrying about it all the time will do nothing for you. Well, that's not true. As a child, I learned that if I worried about things and thought about them and planned ahead of time, I could prevent heartache sometimes. I could prevent mistakes. So when somebody tells me that no amount of worrying will change the future, my thought is, that's insane. That's not true at all from my experience, even from watching other people in life. But what I will tell you is the cost of that worry is joy and peace and freedom and spontaneity and authenticity. Narcissism. I can't say this one too emphatically, but I'll just say it simply. Everybody has some narcissistic wounding. Everybody does. Narcissistic wounding is the absence. Narcissistic wounding is essentially small t trauma. It's not being seen and accepted and loved as you are, essentially. So the development of narcissistic traits or defenses is that you have to be good or productive or pretty or smart or rich or whatever. Good. Whatever it is that you were told that you had to be that got you attention from the big people. That's the narcissistic defense. So everybody has narcissistic wounding. Everybody does. So when people love to talk about narcissists and self-help and on social media, I don't see many people talking about it in a way that looks very informed, because if it was informed, they would know that they have it too. And furthermore, when somebody says to me, and I say this all the time, that they have an alcoholic spouse or a narcissistic ex-spouse or whatever it is, I always say, well, that's interesting, but what's really compelling is, why would you marry a narcissist? That, to me, is the most important question. How were you fooled? Why did it look normal to you? Of course, the answer is because it kind of looked and felt like home. Because most parents, most people, and therefore most parents are unaware of their narcissistic wounding. Essentially, narcissistic wounding is the wound behind all of our defenses. It's the need to be good. It's the need to not be bad. It is the it's the opposite of the audacity to be you. But as I say in that book, in this way of thinking, on this journey, and this kind of model, you don't get to be right or good or win anymore. But you do get to be a self, a person. And that is so much better. Lastly, it is this idea in therapy that I don't know your truth. I am not an expert on your truth. I'm not an expert on what you need to do. I'm not an expert on if you should stay married or get divorced or quit your job or get a new job or go back to school or join a religion or leave a religion. I have no opinions about any of that stuff. Because I'm not about trying to build up something that I think is the right thing to be. I'm trying to find you. I'm trying to help you develop a kind of inner knowing, an inner resonance, an inner kind of calibration, a tuning fork that you carry around so that when you go out in the world, you'll find your people because you'll know when they resonate with that tuning fork that you carry inside of you. If you are largely unconscious, unhealed, haven't explored it, you will find what feels comfortable to you, which is your background, your context. You will gravitate toward fundamentally, not on the surface, not on the surface. It gets confusing because it looks different on the surface. You will find a fundamental kind of consciousness, maturity, emotional development that reminds you of your childhood. If you become more conscious and begin to heal, you'll gravitate toward people that are more conscious and more healed. But the therapist is not an expert on your life. I don't give advice, not because I'm following a technique, but because that's just the truth. I don't know what you should do. I was once on a podcast where the question was asked of every guest, what's the most important lesson you've learned as a father? And as I thought about that, because I knew the question was coming, I realized every time I think about the lesson I've learned, it's from a mistake. In fact, if any of you find me at all interesting or compelling, or you find what I have to say of value, I will tell all of you. Nearly everything I have to say of any value has come from my mistakes. I have an inner knowing of some of these things because I've tried it. I've experimented. The particular wounding I had from childhood was not intrusive, overbearing, consuming parents. It wasn't that. I didn't have that like many people do. I had parents who were not present, literally not present, unavailable. I was a latchkey child in the 80s in the way that was quintessential. I was the poster child for latchkey children. So they weren't available. We were poor. My father wasn't around, and my mother was working full-time at minimum wage. So by the end of her days, her resources were completely depleted, and she wasn't available. And being a parent, I have all the empathy and compassion in the world for what it must have felt like to raise three teenage boys at the same time. But that absence gave me it's my wound, right? My great fear is, of course, being abandoned, like many people's. But that space that was given to me was also where my gift is, because I tried everything. I experimented with a lot of things. Some of it almost killed me. Some of it scared the bejesus out of everybody around me, my teachers, the big people, my parents, grandparents, the professionals that were asked to assist in our family. But I know some things because of experience. And so now I want to end with this idea. It's from Buddhism, from Thich Nhat Hanh, but I'm going to borrow it and place it right here. Thich Nhat Hanh said, in your practice, imagine yourself as the most vile sinner, as the most despicable political leader. Keep practicing until you see yourself in that. In a starving child, in a dictator, in a criminal. And when you see yourself and see those parts in yourself well enough, you'll have a couple of choices at that point. You'll punish yourself, or you'll learn to love yourself. And what I have learned is that punishing and hating, trying to kill myself either slowly through drugs and alcohol, or kill myself literally at some time in my life, I had that thought. I found that those were too great of a burden to carry, and they didn't really do the trick anyway. And so I finally surrendered to love. I dared to love and accept myself. As many mistakes, as much harm that I had done to myself and others, I finally accepted. Began to accept, I should say, who I was. And what happened then was so amazing, because then I was free. Then I could take all that energy that I had spent my entire life trying to be good and be right and not be bad. I could take all that energy that was now freed up, because now I didn't need to be good. I accepted my horrible, rotten self. I could take all that excess energy, and now I could use it toward loving people. So like the great teacher Alan Watts said, once we realize that there's nothing on the dark side to be afraid of, nothing is left but love. And when we do things to be good, when we even the commandment to love others, if we do it because it's a commandment, it's not really love. Love is not something you can just command. It takes work, it takes capacity. It's something that you develop an ability to do, because it's an act. So for me, the treasure and the gift of learning to love your horrible, rotten self is peace and freedom. And I get to spend my life now loving other nincompoops like myself. And that makes my life worthwhile. So thank you for that. All right, folks, if you're not aware, we have launched the Finding You Inner Circle. If you are attending tonight or listening to this and you're not a member of the Inner Circle, that means you're not paying our subscription of $10 a month, or you're not an alumni. If you would like to be an Inner Circle member and get access to these live broadcasts and to a couple of hours a month that are not available to the general public, go to our website and reach out to us through our portal, or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. My 3 books are The Journey of the Heroic Parent, The Audacity to Be You, and my co-authored book is Stay in the Room. They're all available on Amazon, wherever books are sold, and the first 2 on Audible. The third one, the audiobook, will be out later this year. If you're interested in going to a workshop with me and my daughter this summer and fall, The Audacity to Be You, Learning to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self, I'll be at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, July 12th through 17th. And I'll be at the Art of Living Retreat Center in Boone, North Carolina, September 27th through October 2nd. You can reach out to us or go to their respective websites to learn more. If you'd like to attend an intensive with me, the one that I'll be doing this year for sure is June 10th through 14th. So if you'd like to work with me, if that's something that matters to you, there's a couple of spots left and it's going to sell out. June 10th through 14th is that offering. For all other inquiries, for private intensives for couples and families, if you want to find out about our support group, if you're an alumni, if you're looking for a coach or a therapist, go to our website, contact us through the portal, or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. My next broadcast will be next Tuesday, a week from tonight. I'm going to be talking about critical thinking and logical fallacies in therapy. Strange topic, I know. But I'm going to be talking about this idea of appealing to authority, which is a logical fallacy, or developing this inner knowing, this muscle inside of us where we get to decide what's true for us, not somebody telling us. So look forward to that next Tuesday. Thank you for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And as always, for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up and listening, because you doing your work makes all the difference in the world. Just keep going. Just keep going. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.